So, how did it do it? How did this movie, in a pandemic, make so much fucking money?
Hi, I'm Joseph Holmes. I'm a culture critic, filmmaker, and podcast host. I'm podcast host of the Overthinkers podcast, and of course, a film critic for Religion Unplugged and other places. And of course, I'm a professional nerd. I've been a comic book fan and a comic book movie fan my whole life.
He's the real deal. I stole him straight from the comic shop. It's fine, he needs a social interaction.
You know I have friends other than you, right?
You'll never convince me of that.
Love you too, KP.
This is the same Joe from that one time, in case you've been watching this channel for the whole time. Shout out to those people, you're cool. So Joe, what's your relationship to Spider-Man?
So, Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero as a kid. I loved superheroes, but he was the superhero who seemed closest to who I was. He was closest to me in age, he was always cracking jokes, and he seemed like he was having as much fun being a superhero as I was watching him be one. When I got older, I preferred Iron Man and Superman because I was looking for more adult heroes, but there's a pure magic in Spider-Man. It's been said before, and it's worth saying again. The relatability factor is one of the most revolutionary things about Spider-Man. Remember, Spider-Man is the third most famous superhero in the world, right after Superman and Batman. What made Spider-Man different was that he was the closest hero to the actual lives of the real comic book fans. He wasn't an alien, he wasn't rich, he wasn't a full-grown adult. He was a young, nerdy kid who struggled with relationships and money problems and self-esteem and everything that normal people, including the people who bought comic books, went through. If superheroes' appeal is that they're both super and human, then Spider-Man was the closest to putting the human in the super, which made us believe being super was believable.
As for me, Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero. I grew up with the PS1 game.
Kid mode.
Kid mode, baby. I'm also very well versed in both the Tobey Maguire movies and the video games. So I'm aware of Bruce Campbell's amazing gameplay narration. Bruce Campbell is friends with director Sam Raimi from the Evil Dead series. He makes cameos in all the Raimi movies, in case you didn't know that. Oh, and also, my dog is named Tobey Maguire, and all his dog shit is Spider-Man themed. I probably would have named him Jolly, the goat from the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but he's a rescue and already named Toby, so I decided not to make him have an existential crisis, as a dog. I feel like the Garfield movies are, okay, and I don't keep up with the MCU and just ask Joe about it, mostly.
Can confirm. Forgive her, fanboys.
Some of us have a life. So Joe, we're going to be talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, why it resonated so deeply, what its roots are from the comics, and how it changed things. What is the main feeling of the MCU leading up to No Way Home? Put us in the mood. Remember 2001 for its one good thing.
So, 2021. Not in my top 10 years of all time. I did not give it a good Yelp review. And ironically, Marvel movies were kind of taking a break as well anyway. We had just finished the big finale of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that was Avengers Endgame just before the pandemic. Iron Man died, Cap was gone, Marvel had just done the impossible, which was essentially create a finale to an interconnected movie universe, which had never been done before. And now it was the kind of question of, where do you go from here? You could say our fictional heroes were gone when we needed them most, aka 2020. Most of the Marvel stuff that had come out after Endgame were on Disney Plus, like WandaVision, Loki, Falcon, Winter Soldier. People hadn't really gone back to the movies in a while, what with the pandemic, and people hadn't really been very satisfied with Marvel's outings. Marvel came up with the idea to do something, again, which no one had ever done before. Connect different reboots of franchises. One that would hit people right in the nostalgia and help them believe in the optimism they had before about heroism, particularly millennials and Gen X. Since Toby is our Spider-Man, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
It's your thing.
It's part of my charm.
It's part of something.
Charm.
Yeah, okay. I think I was mostly blown away at the time by the movie's use of taking past elements of establishing mythology of the Spider-Man franchises and turning those emotional feelings into beats in a script. We love Tobey Maguire, and we love the Green Goblin. We love Doc Ock, but I also think it's safe to say that people are generally vibing with Tom Holland's portrayal due to how young he is, and therefore accurate to the character, as well as updating its ideas a little bit, giving him a Wade and an unorthodox Mary Jane in the form of Zendaya.
Yeah, people forget. No one had ever connected different versions of movie franchises before. Sean Connery's James Bond had never met Daniel Craig's James Bond. So everyone knew that when Spider-Man was brought into the MCU, it would be a different version of Spider-Man than what we'd seen with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. It wasn't even a question. And people loved Tom Holland's Spider-Man, who was very much like a Gen Z Peter in the same way Tobey felt like a millennial Peter. And his relationship with Tony Stark was something beautiful and pure that we hadn't really got. I should say, they've done crossovers before in TV, like with Law and Order and with in comic book superheroes with the Crisis on Infinite Earths in the Arrowverse. But movie franchises hadn't really done it before.
So, why is it important to talk about this movie?
Spider-Man No Way Home is one of the most revolutionary franchise movies ever made, and a nostalgia fan service movie that understands the real reasons we love nostalgia and fan service better than any movie I've ever seen. It's the most pure love letter to Spider-Man, but not only Spider-Man, but Spider-Man fans and even comic book fans that has ever really been made. And of course, this isn't news to say, as pretty much everyone commenting on this has already said this, but this is the ultimate fan service movie. But people don't really understand how far, if I may say, the web is weaved.
Let's get started then. So, how does the movie start?
So, in the last Spider-Man movie, we ended with showing Jameson sporting his best Alex Jones haircut, showing the footage Mysterio played revealing Spider-Man's secret identity.
Why was J.K. Simmons cast as Jameson again, when he's the only actor who's kept from the other movies?
The directors say that they were looking at doing Jameson, they just couldn't imagine anyone else in the role. Kind of funny, since they could imagine a different Peter Parker in the role, but not a different Jameson, but Kevin Feige said the same thing about Doc Ock and Green Goblin.
But more on them later.
Another funny piece. Matt Pat of Film Theory did an episode where he showed that the charges against Spider-Man for killing Mysterio and using the drones to kill people wouldn't hold up in court.
So, how often has Spider-Man's identity been revealed in the Marvel Comics?
Really only once in the main continuity, during the Civil War storyline in Marvel Comics, which this movie borrows heavily from its aftermath. Comic Book Resources had a good article on 15 times Spider-Man's identity was revealed, but most of them are of him revealing it to his close friends, or when it was him being publicly revealed, nobody believed it. Now, Superman, he's had his identity revealed and hidden again twice in the past 10 years. So like Spider-Man is really like, he rarely does this in the comics.
Tom Holland and Zendaya are really cute in this opening.
Funny story about Tom Holland and Zendaya. Amy Pascal has worked with every single Spider-Man cast, and she, from Tobey Maguire to now, and she says that every time she's told the leads, Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, Tom Holland and Zendaya, don't date each other. And every time they ignored her. And why not? Your opposite co-star is one of the cutest stars in the world.
You're saying you'd hit that?
Obviously. Toby's gorgeous.
No comment.
Another fun trivia. In the comics, Flash Thompson was the classic jock bully that he was in the Raimi movies. But the MCU decided that Peter was going to be going to a nerd school, so they made Flash a nerd rival. Also, the guy playing Foggy Nelson was also the director of the first Iron Man film.
So he cast himself as Foggy? Why?
Because he wanted to.
Why isn't Pepper in this helping Peter with his legal troubles?
That was a big criticism of her in this movie by fans, makes her seem awful, but the reality is Gwyneth Paltrow just isn't interested in playing Pepper anymore, or really acting anymore. Funny story.
Another one?
Go get him, Tiger, was what Mary Jane said to Peter at the end of Spider-Man 2. It's also a reference to MJ's first appearance in the Spider-Man comics, where she said to him, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." And that was in Spider-Man 42. So, Flashpoint. Kevin Feige has a reputation, he's the producer of the Marvel movies, for trying to make sure he always stole DC movies' thunder. For example, the reason he did Captain America versus Iron Man in Captain America Civil War was because DC was doing Batman v Superman. So in this case, Flashpoint is the title of the Flash storyline about time travel and the multiverse that they've been trying to put out in a movie for a while, and they finally putting out with the movie The Flash. But Marvel, by making Flash's memoir Flashpoint, Marvel gets to do the multiverse and technically the Flashpoint first.
Why? DC movies are nothing compared to Marvel movies. It's basically spiteful at this point.
Kevin just needs to win.
So when did the multiverse come into the comics?
Glad you asked. It started in 1961.
Wait, I changed my mind!
Too late.
God damn it. Introduction of the multiverse into comics.
The first thread of this web goes back to 1961, which was the first time that in popular culture the idea of the multiverse was popularized. This was in Flash 123, The Flash of Two Worlds. Flash met another Flash from another dimension. Even here we see the shades of, in the origins of the use of the multiverse, the way the multiverse was going to be used in Spider-Man No Way Home. Because this multiverse story had two Flashes. But it wasn't just any two Flashes. It was the Flash that most of us know, Barry Allen, with the first version of the Flash that DC had created back in the 1940s, Jay Garrick. But his comic had been canceled after comics lost their popularity during the 1950s during a scare that comic books were corrupting youth. When these characters were rebooted in the 1960s, the Flash was brought back with the same powers, but given a new secret identity, a new origin, basically becoming a completely different character. That was the case of many DC characters whose comics were created in the 1940s. They rebooted them in the 60s whenever they had been canceled characters, like Green Lantern, for example. This didn't apply to Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman because their comics were never canceled. Many of the people who were working on the 1960s versions of these characters had also worked on and were fans of the 1940s versions of these characters. And many of the people who were reading the new version of the Flash were fans of the old version of the Flash too. And so writers came up with this clever idea of the multiverse as a way of bringing back the old characters without getting rid of the new characters. It was basically a way of having your cake and eating it too. You could have the new versions of the characters without killing the old versions of the characters, thereby letting the fans preserve their relationship with them. It was like having an old friend. Instead of them being dead or never having existed, they were just in a different country and you could visit them every so often. For fans, this was a big deal. The idea of the multiverse would become ubiquitous in both DC and Marvel comics, but especially DC comics for a long time. There would be a lot of team-ups between DC characters and the old versions of the characters, but they would also use the multiverse as an outlet for creativity. There were a lot of stories you couldn't tell with these classic characters because it would change too much things in canon. But in the multiverse, you could. Want to tell a story where Superman got married? Good news. Tell that in the multiverse. Want to explore an evil version of Batman? Good news. That can be in the multiverse. DC did the ultimate multiverse story in the 80s with Crisis on Infinite Earths by bringing all the multiverse characters together to fight a common threat, and then erased most of those universes to build back to and reboot the universe and start fresh, because they thought that all of those multiverses were making it harder for newer fans to understand everything. But they would eventually bring back the multiverse because it was just too good a way to preserve fans' relationship with different versions of their favorite characters and create outlets to tell different kinds of stories. Of course, the multiverse was not invented by pop culture or comic books, but comic books were the place that the idea of the multiverse got brought into popular culture and the popular imagination instead of just being an abstract scientific theory. Ironically, it wasn't until very recently that Marvel Comics really started to use the idea of the multiverse themselves instead of just leaving it to DC Comics, which they did first with Spider-Man. The comic Spider-Verse was a story which teamed up our Spider-Man with different versions of Spider-Man throughout the multiverse that many fans had affection for. Spider-Man 2099, Spider-Girl, who is Peter Parker and Mary Jane's daughter from the future, Miles Morales Spider-Man, Spider-Gwen, who is in the Spider-Verse movie, which we'll talk about, all came together to fight a seemingly unstoppable threat. The story was instantly popular, partly because it allowed fans of the different versions of Spider-Man to have their own favorite Spider-Man in the same story. Miles Morales was a big part of this. You see, Marvel had, in the 2000s, created a version of their Marvel characters in Marvel Universe called the Ultimate Marvel Universe, where they took characters like Spider-Man and the Avengers and rebooted them with new origins and new histories like they were starting over from scratch so that they could tell modern versions of these characters as if they were invented today. These stories had a huge influence on the movies, with the Avengers versions of Nick Fury, who had been white in the comics prior to the Ultimates version of the character, and Iron Man particularly being used as the template for the movie versions of these characters. But as the regular Marvel comics started incorporating many of these modernized elements that worked in these reimaginings into their own stories, the uniqueness of what the Ultimate Universe brought to the table was lost, so those comics were set to be canceled. And yet, there were a few characters like Miles Morales' version of Spider-Man, a black version of the character who was more innocent and had a different personality than Peter, that people really loved. The multiverse was a way for bringing him into the canon Spider-Man Marvel Universe world, and so you can see Peter Parker and Miles Morales hanging out. This captured the imagination of comics for the same reason the multiverse characters have always captured the imagination. Everybody's favorite version of the character got to be valid and real and valued. and fans didn't have to choose between the version of Spider-Man that they got to see. We got to see all of them. We got to have whatever Spider-Man represented you. Your Spider-Man. You could follow their adventures. Peter Parker fans didn't have to feel like Miles Morales was replacing Spider-Man, and Miles Morales fans didn't have to lose their Spider-Man. And the Spider-Men became friends, showing you didn't have to become competitors of each other. This, of course, reached its zenith when Sony made the groundbreaking and incredibly popular Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, which introduced non-comic fans to both Miles Morales and the idea of the Spider-Man multiverse. Here, the multiverse gives a way to express the idea that was always in Spider-Man by having somebody with a mask that could be anyone underneath it. The fact that we could all be Spider-Man and therefore we could all be heroes. That's something Dan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man, explicitly said was a part of the appeal of Spider-Man. Peter Parker's Spider-Man is a straight white male, but Miles Morales' Spider-Man is black, and Spider-Gwen is a woman. And there's even a non-American Spider-Man. No matter what your race, color, or creed, there was a Spider-Man for you. So there are no longer any barriers to the idea that with great power comes great responsibility. In an era where more and more we see a moral society as one where glory and access to all the good things of life needs to be extended to everyone, not just those who meet certain conditions of power or privilege, this message that anyone can be Spider-Man deeply resonates. Of course, Kevin Feige, the producer, architect of the Marvel Universe, has never been one to let a good idea that somebody else thought of go to waste when he can just do it himself and make it even more popular. Just like he did with Batman v Spider-Man, but had to upstage it with Captain America versus Iron Man. If Amy Pascal over at Sony, working with her Spider-Man, things were doing a multiverse and making it super popular, by gosh, he was going to turn all of Marvel into a multiverse story, and of course, he was going to do his own version of the Spider-Verse.
Okay, enough. We'll get there. Back to the movie. Show me more trivia.
Side note, Mysterio had the best boss battle ever in the Spider-Man 2 game. If people don't know why that is, they should check it out.
Okay, enough. We'll get there. Back to the movie. Show me more trivia.
Either way, we'll all be together in Boston. New school, new town. I can Spider-Man there. I mean, they have crime in Boston, right?
Yes.
The "they've got crime in Boston" line is a reference to Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he decides he's going to go to England with Gwen Stacy. He says, "I can fight crime in England. They have crime in England, right?"
The runes of Kafka.
The runes of Kafka.
Oh, it's just a standard spell of forgetting.
I do have to say, I lost so much respect for Doctor Strange in this movie.
That feels weird, but I'll allow it.
I was really enjoying him as the adult in the MCU who actually behaved responsibly, but brainwashing the world, even if the spell wasn't dangerous, no. Also should point out, a lot of people in Spider-Man supporting cast got to conclude their arcs from the trilogy, even little things like the brief shot of Liz Allen being on the cover of a magazine.
Tell us about Green Goblin and Doc Ock. What's their importance?
So, Green Goblin and Doc Ock are two of Spidey's most important villains, along with Venom.
Is there a reason why Venom from the Tobyverse isn't in this?
Yeah, nobody liked him. He was basically shoehorned in and not done very well, so nobody really cares to have him back.
Gonna cry?
People prefer the Tom Hardy Venom, which isn't perfect, but to be fair, is better.
Okay.
In Spider-Man lore, in Spider-Man's comic history, Doc Ock was the first villain from the comics who actually beat Spider-Man in a fight. He was the first villain that made Spider-Man have to level up as a hero and was always one of his greatest enemies. Green Goblin was important, not only because he killed Gwen Stacy in the comics, who was Spider-Man's first real true love, but because his agenda was always not just to beat Spider-Man physically, but morally. He didn't want Spider-Man dead, but corrupted, like him, to prove that the Goblin's moral code was right and Spider-Man was wrong, because it wouldn't survive under pressure.
You're an amazing creature, Spider-Man. You and I are not so different.
The movies took those traits of those villains and made them the central themes of those movies. Doc Ock was even tougher an opponent than the Goblin and represented the pressure of being Spider-Man was overwhelming. Goblin was even more of a satanic tempter figure than in the comics, something they carried over into this movie.
I was trying to see if you have the tingle thing.
I have the tingle thing, just not for...
Another note, I hate Peter Tingle. It's spider sense.
That's the joke.
I don't like it.
Hey look, Venom got upstaged by a tree.
Hiding in the shadows. Hiding from who you truly are. Oh. You can't escape yourself.
Look, Norman Osborn destroyed the Goblin mask that everyone hated.
Everyone hated the mask?
Ever hear the Power Rangers jokes?
People are so picky. Is Aunt May's Feast food pantry from the comics or just the games?
The comics. Same deal. Mr. Negative Guy runs it.
We'll be right back after a brief word from Daily Bugle Supplements, the only other daily fix you need.
Hey look, Jameson got an upgrade.
Spidey sells.
Attract customers to your business. Make a splash at your next presentation. Keep grandma company. Protect your crops. Confuse your neighbors.
So, here's an interesting question. Do you think Peter is right or Doctor Strange is right? I'm firmly on Doctor Strange's side here. I know, controversial, but in my defense, I'm completely in the right.
How do you mean?
Well, the idea is to show mercy to these villains because they're still humans, so their lives matter. What about all the innocent people they might kill? Don't their lives matter? You're putting those people at risk by not sending them back. But isn't that always the risk when you show mercy? Yes, but in this case, the rest of the people in the world that he might be putting in danger haven't consented to that risk, even theoretically in a criminal justice system. That means it's a deeply immoral choice. Also, as MatPat pointed out in another film theory video, because of the timing of when they get sent back, they all would die anyway regardless.
You need to get out more.
Oh, interesting here. So, how Spider-Man evaded Doctor Strange while in the astral form is really interesting. There's a controversy among Spider-Man writers of how Spidey reacts to his spider sense.
Peter Tingle.
Spider sense!
Tingle!
Is it something that he has to consciously react to, or does he react to it instinctively? Does he feel the tingle, and then decide how to react to it? Or is his reaction, like when he dodges a bullet, instinctive? It looks like here, the makers of the film are taking the side that it's instinctive. Therefore, Peter can dodge Strange even in his astral form.
Spider-Man No Way Home. It's a Christmas movie.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
He said the meme!
Can we talk about all the references to memes now?
Hold on. Let's just wait until all the Spideys are together.
Fine.
Where's Connors? He told me he wants to stay in the truck.
You can't let him stay in the truck! Peter mentions that the tech in this world is very advanced. That's a reference to the fact that the world of the MCU, what with Tony Stark and Banner and S.H.I.E.L.D. all existing in it, really is more of a sci-fi world than Andrew Garfield's or Tobey Maguire's was, which was much more grounded, not being a part of the shared universe. The only parts of the universe that were sci-fi in the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield movies was Oscorp. But in Marvel Universe, even beyond just the magic and stuff like that, is so much more of a sci-fi world. Fun fact, Ant-Man and Doc Ock had a romance in the comics.
Gross fact.
Maybe it is a little. Who would have seen that coming?
Up here! He's up there!
Why would Doc Ock leave? He just leaves?
I don't know.
Why though?
So the plot can happen.
This I'm out.
Strong enough to have it all. Too weak to take it!
Here it is. This is why Green Goblin is different. He's happy when Peter is ruthless with him. He's happy when Peter is punching him that way because he doesn't want to kill Peter. He wants to make him like him. Originally, May was going to die in an ambulance, but they had to change it because of COVID. Honestly, I think this works better because then the cops can chase him away and it makes it more tragic because he's not even allowed to grieve.
Not my responsibility, May.
Oh, what Norman said? My moral mission. No, Peter, you listen to me. You have a gift. You have power. And with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
She said the line! She has to die! Hashtag Doctor Strange was right.
Let it go, Joe.
Why has she not pressed the button by now?
Have you tried switching to decaf?
Great, it's just some random guy.
Hello. I hope it's okay. I just came through this, oh, just closed.
You're Peter.
Yeah, Peter Parker. I've seen you two.
How did he recognize them? He says he's seen them before?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know everything.
What good are you?
All the other stuff I do know.
Sure, Jan.
That came out of you.
Yeah, you can't do that, huh?
No?
How on earth does that even?
Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Look, this is where we're gonna do this, okay? It's isolated, so no one should get hurt. We draw them there with a box. It's the one thing they all want. All we have to do is figure out how we're gonna get there.
Oh, we could portal there.
What?
I'm magic now.
Yeah, no, he's right. Yeah, he can.
Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah, he is.
Wait, really?
Dude, I got Doctor Strange magic. Wait. Yeah. And I promise you, I won't turn into a supervillain and try to kill you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about Spidey and the memes.
So it all started.
Don't go on forever this time.
I've only got like 5 pages of notes.
Ugh.
So far, we've discussed how creatives have used the device of the multiverse to reboot characters without replacing the old versions fans love, and how the multiverse can be a metaphor for diversity and potential for anyone to become a hero. But Kevin Feige still found ways to use the multiverse in ways that both revolutionized franchise filmmaking and explored the emotional appeal of nostalgia. First, Kevin Feige revolutionized franchise movies by using the multiverse to have actors who play the same character in different entries of the franchise to reprise their roles and meet each other. This may sound obvious, but this has barely ever happened before. Sean Connery's James Bond never met Daniel Craig's James Bond. Michael Keaton's Batman never met Christian Bale's Batman. It happened in the Star Trek reboot with Leonard Nimoy, Spock meeting Zachary Quinto's Spock. Like time travel. And it happened on TV in the Arrowverse Crisis on Infinite Earths adaptation to have previous versions of Superman meet each other, and of course, a Flash, etc., using the device of the multiverse. But nothing had ever been done in the movies at this scale before. This means that the movie could connect multiple generations of fans of the characters in ways that had not been done before, with a generation that resonated with Toby, Andrew, and Tom all getting to see their favorites all working together. On a more subtle and still overt level, the movie was about celebrating incorporating fan intranet culture into the world of canon. Typically and historically, fan culture and creative culture has been separate, with creatives being behind movies doing their thing, while fan culture around those characters doing their thing. This makes sense because up until recently, the feedback loop between artists and their fans was pretty one-sided, with creators influencing fan culture, but fan culture not overtly influencing the stories. Tolkien's fans had to write letters to him after he'd finished all his books. But now you have the internet where fan communities can grow and have a voice and have jokes that rise to the top for everyone to see, and a character that has spanned decades and a movie franchise that has crossed 3 reboots and is now incorporating those different franchises into one story. So Spider-Man fans have had a lot of internal debates and jokes that they make about the character, out of the character's history, that have never made it into the movies, with memes being made out of the old 1960s Spider-Man cartoon with 2 Spider-Men pointing at each other being made into a meme, which was in the 1960s Spider-Man Season 1, Episode 36, titled Double Identity. The team up of villains hanging out together being made into a meme, and jokes being made about how Tobey Maguire is the only Spider-Man to have organic web shooters. This movie took those memes and in-jokes that the fans had as the fan community and made them canon to the movies. So for the first time, a big franchise being influenced by the fan community instead of just the fan community being influenced by the creators. The fan culture, they had built a feedback loop back into the news stories about the character. So the feedback loop was not only now creators to fans, but fans back to creators. Even the team up between Spider-Man and Doctor Strange is a nod to the comics, because Spider-Man and Doctor Strange were the only 2 superheroes that Stan Lee created with artist Steve Ditko, when most of them were created with artist Jack Kirby. But very little has been made of that in the comics, with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange never really having a real relationship with each other, despite their common co-creator. I mean, there were some interesting stories with J. Michael Straczynski, and also in this storyline that they adapted from the aftermath of Civil War, there was some stuff, but very little. This movie gives them one they never had in the comics. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have done a little bit with this with Star Wars too, when it comes to the feedback loop. Specifically how in The Mandalorian they incorporated the jokes that fans have made for years about how bad the aim of stormtroopers are into canon by having the characters in the story make fun of how bad stormtroopers' aim is. But Spider-Man was really the first to really celebrate that aspect of sending the feedback loop back in and making it a central part of what it was celebrating as a story. The other thing that Spider-Man Far From Home brought to movies and multiverse was how the multiverse can be a device for closure.
Enough! We'll talk about closure when we get to Doc Ock's moment.
Such a great moment.
Such a great moment. By the way, Dr. Connors, does he die in the other movie?
He does not, actually.
Huh, so he's not saved either.
Oh, there it goes.
You okay?
Oh, my back.
The back meme!
The back meme!
More memes!
My back! Oh, my back! I want to fight an alien.
I'm still like that you fought an alien in space.
I'm lame compared. Like I fought a Russian.
Obviously, this is a meta commentary on how everybody talks about Andrew's Spider-Man being the lamest Spider-Man. As with everything else, they made the fan community conversation a part of his personality and character arc.
Then there's the, you're amazing.
Because that's what his movies were called.
Because that's what the movies are called. I know, we get it.
You're amazing. Just to take it in for a minute.
Okay. I just wish we could see Peter.
Now, here's another interesting tidbit. Originally, it was going to be America Chavez bringing Tobey and Andrew, back when Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was going to come out first, but COVID forced rescheduling and reshoots. I honestly think this version works better.
I don't apologize. There's gotta be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there.
Miles Morales reference.
Apparently that was improv by Jamie Foxx.
No way.
The power of the sun.
The redemption of Doc Ock's arc.
So good.
What are you doing? Get it off of me! There you go.
Andrew Garfield saves MJ.
Now we need to talk about the restoration.
You got it. It all started.
I'll get you some more coffee.
You see, all the previous Spider-Man franchises ended in largely disappointing circumstances. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had a disappointing third entry, and Amazing Spider-Man had a largely disappointing second entry that set up character development for Peter and larger storylines for Spider-Man that we never got to see. But by telling a good final story with these characters that incorporated elements of those previous disappointing entries, No Way Home gave closure to those character arcs and even redeemed those stories because those stories, those lame stories, made possible the payoff character moments we got in this story. The convoluted romance drama of Spider-Man 3 made it possible for Spider-Man to give words of romantic advice to Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. The messed up Amazing Spider-Man 2 made it possible for the dark and relatable depression and self-loathing of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man believable, and made his return and redemption some of the high points of the movie. There's a reason that everyone cheered the loudest in the theater that I was there when Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man saved MJ. This goes even further into the Spider-Man comic book lore. You see, this comic is based on a few Spider-Man comics, including taking inspiration from Spider-Verse, but a big part of it is based on the One More Day storyline from the comics, where Spider-Man went to Mephisto, which is the name of the devil in Marvel Comics, to erase the knowledge of his secret identity to the world to save Aunt May's life after he revealed it himself as part of the Superhuman Registration Act in Marvel Comics version of the Civil War storyline. Mephisto agreed to do this if Peter agreed to let him erase his marriage to Mary Jane, as a clever way to get rid of Peter's marriage in the comics so younger readers could relate to him more. Many fans obviously objected to this story because it was the opposite of Spider-Man's ethos, sacrificing others in order to avoid responsibility for his mistakes. No Way Home redeems the storyline by taking its basic elements and making it a story where Peter learns to take responsibility rather than avoiding it.
We all freaked out when this happened, didn't we?
I lost years off my life.
There's gotta be something we could do. Can't you just cast the spell again? But the original way, before I screwed it up.
We're too late for that. They're here.
Okay, I gotta get this off my chest. This spell bothers me.
A lot of things bother you.
It's just so arbitrary. Why does this make a difference? This new spell. Why is it that it's too late to do the old spell, but not too late to do this new spell? And why is it that one that makes everyone forget who Peter Parker is? Where did Peter Parker pull that from? It's just so arbitrary. Why does the old spell not work, but this new arbitrarily invented new spell actually work?
Because plot needs to happen.
Yeah, this plot needs to happen. Another thing, why did he just leave? If Peter is just planning to explain to them who he is, why doesn't he just stay there to the introductions then? It would be a lot less mean. They're just standing there in the middle of nowhere. You could explain to them why they're there and then swing them away and take them home.
It looks dramatic.
It does look dramatic. Also, it would make far more sense to make his intro to them as Spider-Man and not Peter Parker. They know who Spider-Man is, so if he unmasks, then they have context. Introducing him as Peter Parker is just strange. He's just a total stranger.
Hi, my name is Peter Parker.
Of course, the real reason they did things this way is they needed a way to write Spider-Man out of the Marvel Universe if they couldn't renegotiate the Sony Marvel deal once the contracts were up.
So it wasn't so the plot could happen. It was so capitalism could happen.
Pretty much.
Show me the money!
I will say, I am also slightly unsatisfied with the ending. I get why they did it, but also, it just feels like a step backwards. Tobey Maguire already told the story of a Peter as a loner who couldn't get close to anyone, and Spider-Man 2 pretty much ended that story and showed how he could get close to people and that was okay. The new Spider-Man trilogy put Spider-Man in a community of people he was close to, and this movie showed him with MJ and Ned as a team. That was bringing something new to the Spider-Man world that we hadn't really seen before. Now we're just back to Spider-Man stories we've already done and don't feel like they need to be rehashed. But that's just me.
Okay, so that's the movie. So why does this all resonate so much with people?
Okay, well. This is what this movie gets about nostalgia stories that other movies don't. People think nostalgia means looking back on the good times and making you happy, but it actually doesn't. Studies show that people do get happier when they're looking back on the old times, but not just the happy old times, but also the sad old times and also sad memories. Well, why is that? Because looking back on your life, the good and the bad, puts your whole life into the realm of a story. When you're living your life, stuff is just happening. Some of it is bad stuff, and some of it is good stuff, but it's all just stuff. If you had a mostly good stuff, that's good. But if you had a lot of bad stuff, that's bad. And if the bad stuff outweighs the good stuff, then your life is bad. And even the good stuff is good, but it just ends. We fix that by putting our life into a story of where we started, where we are now, and where we're going. If our life is a story and we like the story because we like where it ends up, or at least where we think where it ends up is worthwhile, then even the bad stuff isn't so bad because it makes the good stuff possible. And the good stuff is even better because it's good and because it's also making possible the good stuff that will come later. When we're young, when we try to make that story for ourselves, we end up disappointed because the story we thought we were in takes roots we didn't expect or want. And so we have to keep changing that story.
That I can make it.
When we look back, the story is basically over, so we can put it into a story that means something to us, thereby redeeming it. By having the Spider-Man actors redeem their roles, they encourage the fans to look back on their own stories and see them as redeemable. Like all generations, the generations that watched Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield growing up are disappointed in much of their story. But by watching Tobey and Andrew make a good story out of a bad story, both in their franchises and in their personal lives, it inspires the audience to see their own story as redeemable. And of course, this is the same gift that Tobey and Andrew give Tom Holland and what then Tom Holland gives the new generation. They tell him that you get to choose to make the bad into something good now, as a young person before you grow old. You get to decide if the death of your aunt or Uncle Ben or the love of your life will lead you to a bad story or a good story. Peter decides that it will lead to a good story because her death isn't just a bad thing that happens, it's something that gives him the ability to be the hero the world needs, to take responsibility and therefore save the world. And that is the message that Spider-Man has always given people. And that is what the new Spider-Man gives young people today. It's not a coincidence that Spider-Man No Way Home resonates so much today. We live in a world where we are more disconnected from each other than ever. We live further from our families. We aren't getting married. We see friends less. We're disconnected from our past, from our religious heritage, and therefore disconnected from the meta-narratives that make us feel like, regardless of what our life was like, we are still a part of a bigger story that had a happy ending. So our lives were contributing to that and therefore were meaningful. The multiverse has always been a storytelling device that teaches us you don't have to lose one thing to have another. We can be connected to each other as communities and as a narrative. You don't have to lose Toby to get Tom. You don't have to lose a white Spidey to get a black Spidey. Fan culture and canon culture can even become one and the same. Heck, the fact that we have a Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has as its entire point the fact that it's a continuing narrative where every story is connected to the one before and therefore matters, can be seen as us trying to bring a grand narrative back to our lives. What Spider-Man No Way Home adds is that you don't have to ignore the bad parts of your life in order to lead a beautiful life. The bad parts of your life can be redeemed when you look back on it and when you're living it.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please remember to leave a comment and share this video with a friend or 2 or 5. Click here to subscribe, we really appreciate it. Click here to check out the main collaborator for the video. Click here to check out our video playlist for this video, where you'll find similar videos that you might dislike, hopefully. There's also a credit scroll here to check out all the other awesome contributors. All their info is in the description. That's all I gotta say, KP away!